So we're sitting here with Khaduyu Michael. He's with the African Youth Commission. Michael, thank you very much for being with us. So tell us your thoughts about what's happening here at COP. They're working on the final agreement right now as we speak. What are your thoughts in general about this whole process, what's happening here?
I think personally, I came to the COP not expecting too much. I came with an open mind, and as much as people are disappointed, I am not so much disappointed. I knew that there will not be more exorbitant financial commitment. I knew that the idea of the global North supporting African, they are not going to budge. I knew that the idea of loss and damage, as much as we were psyched about it, no much finances were going to be committed, although I was so happy to see it as an agenda item. I was so happy to see that there's a conversation around it. I know I was so happy to see the Africa special circumstances being considered. So personally, to me, I know we've not achieved much because the rate at which the climate disasters and the severity is becoming much worse, but the commitment is so little. So I think it's calling upon us as our own governments. It's calling upon our own, as an African continent, to look inwards and start funding our own initiatives.
Fascinating. And one of the criticisms that we're hearing from different quarters is that it's really inappropriate for Western governments, for European governments, for American governments to say to the Africans, so hey, now we're rich, we're developed, and you guys need to keep your oil in the ground. You guys can't have power plants. You need to run your systems on solar power, and by the way, do it on your own. What are Africans thinking about this idea that they need to develop in what they're calling it a decarbonized or less carbon intensive way when the global north, the Western world, has already developed and become wealthy?
The sad thing is that the more carbon we have on the atmosphere is going to hurt everybody. But also the other reality is that Africa is a youth continent that needs to feed, employ, and empower its young people. And they need to utilize each and every available resource that they have to achieve this. And I know it's a bit controversial and hypocritical for us to say that we are going to continue mining our own oil and our own coal, knowing very well that it's going to hurt our atmosphere and environment. But also, we need to eat. We need to be employed as young people. When a disaster strikes, we need to be able to adapt to the risks. We need to have disaster risk reduction measures. We need to fund all these. All these things require resources. They require money. And where do we get this money? We will take to any dying mother, to any dying father, to a person who is losing his livestock. He will take any money to save his livestock.
Yeah.
So whether it comes from the oil and gas, whether it comes from any sector, they're open to it. So the thing is that we are seeing that just a small tension is causing the European nations to start going back and to start mining their coal, and because I understand during winter with the energy issues they are going really to suffer.
Yeah.
So they need to stay heated, and just a small trigger has made them to roll back on their commitments. So why would we? Because Africa, we need to develop. We are poor. Let's be honest. We are rich in terms of natural resources, but we are poor when it comes to development. So it's a bit hypocritical to expect us not to mine our oil and our coal when you're not willing to fund our just transition conversation. So I think I'm so happy for the presidents and the leaders of Africa who are telling them, if you're not going to help us commit to this, then you're going to fund it, to mine these people so that we can improve our economies and our GDPs.
Yep.
So Africa, we are going to do it the way we do it better.
Yep.
By empowering our people.
And I think a lot of Americans get it too. So we just had an election in the United States. I'm not sure how closely you follow our politics, but the Republican Party just retook control of our House of Representatives. That's where all the money comes from. Also, Donald Trump has just announced that he's running for president again. There's a very real chance he could win. And he has said many times, climate change is a hoax. The idea that CO2 is killing the planet is silly. What do Africans think about what's happening in the American politics? What happens if the new U.S. Congress comes in and says we're not giving money to this climate change process? Where should Africa go from there?
It's such unfortunate that he thinks it's a hoax, and considering the realities that people are suffering, because there are some areas that are experiencing far much disasters that we didn't expect. Like this, the frequency of cyclones that are hitting Mozambique and Zimbabwe and Zambia and the environment. How do you explain that if that's not climate change? So I hope that they will change their narrative as the Republican. Yes, I followed your midterm elections, and I hope that I know the politics are your internal things, but I just hope that should Trump win, he's not going to roll back the commitments that President Biden has done. Yes, the commitments that Biden...
He did that last time. He got out of the Paris Agreement, said we're not playing games.
That's the fear that we have as the climate people.
Yeah.
And I hope that he's seen the effects of climate change and is willing to commit to this. To him saying that it's a hoax, I think that's not true. And I don't know who advises him.
I know who advises him. I've interviewed him. His name is Dr. William Happer. He's a physics professor at Princeton University. And when I talked to him, he said the planet needs much more CO2. It's plant food. It doesn't control the climate. The sea levels are not rising. Very smart man. He's a genius. What makes you convinced? What makes? I mean, there must be climate skepticism, I guess, in Africa also. But why do you think that the CO2 is actually what's responsible for climate changes instead of just natural processes?
It's common sense. We know any child, basic biology says that when we breathe out, we breathe out CO2.
Yeah.
When we take in oxygen, when the CO2 is too much, there's an imbalance. We know very well that the residency period, the CO2 residency period in the atmosphere is 100 years. And we know there's that basic science whereby the sun rays come, hit the surface, and they should be reflected back to beyond the atmosphere. And there are those with the GHG gases being on the rise, they are absorbed back, increasing the temperature. That's basic science. So if you deny that, then we don't have anything to help you to think beyond that, because you may be a professor, but if you don't use your knowledge for the good, then I think your professorship doesn't help anymore, because we go to school to acquire knowledge, to shape the world and make it better, not to push a lobbyist agenda or something that doesn't. It's of self-interest, of self-serving. But the knowledge that
so you think all the scientists who say that it's not true, you think they're all working for lobbyists and
exactly.
You think so?
That's what I'm saying, because I'm sure that professor knows that. Professor Happer, you say?
Professor William Happer of Princeton, one of the most elite
Universities
universities in America.
Very good universities. But for you to say that and you are a whole professor,
we have many. Richard Lindzen, a professor of meteorology at MIT, says it's a climate cult here, that these people are religious wackos. We have Dr. Willie Soon. We have Dr. Niels Axel Morner, who was with the IPCC. He says the sea level is not rising. They're lying. So we have many professors who say that. You think they're all working for lobbyists? They're all lying? What if the other side is lying?
It's so worse that one of them is in the IPCC.
Yeah, Dr. Niels, he quit. He said they're lying. I can't participate in this fraud, so he quit. But is it possible that they're telling the truth?
No.
You don't think so? They must be lying?
I don't think so. I'm not a scientist, but from the rules of basic science, you can know that the sea level is rising, because we can see it, we can experience it in the shorelines in Kenya. One of the UNESCO sites, the Vasco da Gama pillar. One of the sites, there's how do you call it? There's a site that is already, its wall is already being
eroding.
Being eroded. There are even proposals to put a seawall. So if you tell me that the sea is not rising, then why are we putting a seawall in Kenya? Come on, some of these things are basic common sense. And if you're a professor, they work for the lobbyists.
You think so?
Yes, I think so.
Wow.
Because a Republican Party is one of the most respected parties. And
there's two big parties in America. One is Republican, one is Democrat.
No, I'm talking about globally.
Globally, yeah.
Yes, and it stands for something that we aspire as Africa, young people, to see our political parties be to be agenda based or issue based, like the Democrats or Republicans. But for them to take a leave from the biggest agenda that is affecting the globe, I think the Republican National Convention needs to relook at that and come back to the table, because this is an agenda that is affecting everybody.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fascinating. And when people in Africa, I know you can't speak for all Africa, but when people in Africa look at the United States, they see a country that became very, very wealthy. How do you understand that America became such a wealthy and powerful country?
I wouldn't blame developed nations for developing because back then they didn't have the knowledge. Back then they didn't have the science that we have now. And I believe that should they have had the science or the knowledge, they would have done it better. I'm one of those people who are this positive. But now we have the science, we have the knowledge, we have the... So I think the entrepreneurs, because we know America developed so well because they're hardworking people.
Because they
are hardworking people. They developed their own economies themselves.
Yeah.
So I want to say that it is good to use available technology and support those that they do not have the financial capability to be able to afford these technologies. Like for instance, let me give you an example, and it's a bit deviating in a way. You remember when COVID hit? They had the technology, they had the means to manufacture vaccines, but they wanted to ensure that they milk African developing countries enough to pay for the vaccines. This is it's a do or die issue. So I'm saying climate change is also a do or die issue. And there are technologies that already exist that can make people that can improve their resilience levels. Because we know very well that we are going to continue experiencing severe droughts, severe floods. We are going to continue experiencing severe cyclones or tornadoes wherever, it depends on the region that you come from. And there are people with technologies to help reduce the severity. Why don't you help other people? Do you want to wish to sit back and see them die? Is that the intention?
I want to ask you about COVID. I'm glad you mentioned it. In American media, it came out a lot of news that Africa did very well in COVID. Many less people dying, much healthier people. And they tried to explain it because Africans are younger. But a lot of people looked at that and said it's because they didn't take all these vaccines that they did so well. You had some African leaders, like the president of Tanzania, said the whole thing is a hoax. This papaya and this goat tested positive for COVID. And many people in America said the same thing. What do you think about that? I mean, can you trust the European and the American scientists who are telling us these things, that we have to lock down, that we have to take vaccines, that we have to shut down our energy production?
The beauty of this is that Africa also has its own scientists.
Yeah.
And when something comes up, they will go to the lab, do research, and verify it. So when my Kenyan scientist verifies it, I believe them.
Even if they're funded by Bill Gates Foundation, if they're funded by
whoever, if something is not true, somebody will come out and say it is not true. Even if they're funded, they will later resign and tell the truth.
Yeah.
So for me,
we interviewed many doctors and scientists who said it wasn't true, and you know what happened? YouTube takes them down. It's true. Facebook takes them down.
And that is, I know there's a lot of censorship with YouTube, and they should stop that nonsense. If they don't, then you should close YouTube and go make it whatever agenda you want to push, because it's a connecting platform. Let people connect and talk about the issues. Yeah. If you want to shape the agenda, then go shape it from your own. But if it's a global platform, let global agendas be discussed. Yeah. Anyway.
I have one more question for you, and then we got to run. There's a lot of issues with this race stuff in the United States, this critical race theory. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but there's efforts to divide Americans. Well, you're black, you're white, and then we can't be friends. You oppress me. What do African youth think about this debate, this discussion that's happening in America? This Black Lives Matter, all these things.
I think racism is there, not only in the U.S. but if you are a person who's traveled, when you are closed in your own country, you may not know that it exists. But until you travel outside the continent, or even within the continent, but in other countries, you will experience it. And nothing has ever worked when people are divided. You come together and tackle something together. And if I don't think the blacks in the US will be far much well served when they are divided with the whites or the whoever. I think they are better off tackling this issue together with the rest of the either whites, Jews, or whichever group that is trying to divide them. So I know racism exists, and the blacks in Europe or South or America have suffered so much. And I think if we dwell in the past, we are not going to look in the future. And it's good to acknowledge the history, take stock of it, and then build on it as we go ahead, but not totally ignore and then try to brush it under the rug and say that, sweep it under the rug and say that it never happened or something like that. So I will encourage them to keep on pushing for every equality and everything, whenever they feel that they are not well represented, but they should not allow division to take place.
Excellent. Any last message you want to send to Americans, young people in America?
I'll tell them that as Africa youth, we don't want to come to your country. We want to visit and see but that mentality that Africans see the US and everybody wants to come and live there. Personally, I would want to come and see, because I'm a fan of Golden State Warriors, to visit as a tourist and something, but not everybody is running there to come and live there. You've sold America as a country of opportunities, that's fine. We're also making our own Africa as a land of opportunities for us. So that mentality that you are the best country in your own way, but people are also building back home in their own way. So don't youth in America support us to build our own home to be equal to you, because you guys have energy security, you have a good road system and transport system, you have good like a railway system. That's why we are building back home here. And it's much more easier to own it, because when you build it, we'll be employed and create our own wealth here than leaving our own original country and motherland to go to the US and the Europe. I'm one of the Africa youth who believes we will get richer in our own continent, building our own. Yes, we'll come and learn and pick new technologies and good ideas, but not everybody wants to come and stay and live in your own country.
Fantastic. Hey, it's such a pleasure to speak with you, sir. Thank you very much for sharing your time and your insight with us.
Thank you so much.